Hi everyone, and welcome to the Museums Association conference, where we're really excited to be joined by Zeina, Arida, who's the director of the Sursock Museum in Beirut. I'm Simon Stevens from the MA, and I'll be facilitating this session, and I'll be staying on screen to keep Zeina company and to pass on any questions you might have for her. Before we get the session properly underway, just the usual housekeeping announcements. Firstly, I think as you know by now, as attendees, your cameras and microphones should be automatically disabled, but you can use the chat function to introduce yourselves, talk to others and share links and experiences. You can also tweet using our hashtag, which is hashtag museums2020. If you'd like to ask a question, then please share it via the Q&A. You should be able to see this at the bottom of the menu bar. You can leave and rejoin the session at any time. We are recording the session today and it will be available on our website next week. We have both audio description and closed captioning for every session, including this one. So audio description uses the language interpretation feature on Zoom, and it allows you to select a language to listen to a song alongside the main session. If you require audio description, please press interpretation on the toolbar and then choose French actually for the channel. Live captioning is also available at the bottom of your screen. To access it, please press closed captioning and select show subtitles. So now on with that out of the way, now onto the session. Like I said, we're delighted to be joined by Zeina Arida, the director of the Sursock Museum in Beirut. Zeina will be discussing the challenges the Sursock Museum has been facing from the pandemic and the devastating explosion that hit Beirut on the 4th of August. Zeina's had a long career in the Lebanese cultural sector that spans more than 20 years. From 1997 to 2014, she was the director of the Arab Image Foundation, where she set up and managed various artistic and photographic preservation projects. She also serves a board member of the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture from 2006 to 2012, and was a member of the Prince Claus Fund Network Partner Committee from 2007 to 2013. She is also currently a member of the board of directors of the Museum of Civilizations of Europe and the Mediterranean in Marseille, which is a museum I would love to visit but never have done. So, welcome, Zeina. Over to you now. You just need to unmute yourself.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to feel surrounded. I feel that this is a period where we are all very isolated, and it's always very interesting opportunities to be able to, have a conversation such as this one in this context. So I will try to just simply go through the slides while having a kind of conversation rather than a presentation. This is the Sursock Museum, which is a modern and contemporary art museum, opened first in Beirut in 1961. So we are soon celebrating 60th anniversary. The museum, this is the museum as it is today. So the blue is not intended to be. You will see pictures later on with the tainted glass that was blown away. So, sorry, I just need to go to slide 2. Of course, today, the 4th of August explosion changed a lot of things, both in the city and in the country, and for Sursock Museum as well. The explosion, which you probably all know about, it was all over the media, is one of the biggest explosions in the world, non-nuclear. It caused a huge damage to Beirut's urban heritage, killing 200 people, injuring 6,500, destroying more than 60,000 units of offices and households, and the displacement of 300,000 people. This blast, the port of Beirut faces one of the oldest area in Beirut, which has the biggest concentration of heritage building and modern architecture building. This is an area that has been playing the role of center of Beirut. As we know, after the civil war, the center, Beirut downtown was completely rebuilt by the company which is called Solidaire. and it has never find again its soul. It's an area that has only office spaces. Most of the buildings are empty. There is no grocery shop, no really urban life. And the area that was the most damaged by the blast, MUCEM, Marmkhail, are really areas where you have both a lot of bars, restaurants, a very like active nightlife, but also many artists, designers, concept stores, like really places where there's local production, craftsmen, all inhabit that same area. And this is the area that was the most damaged. More than 600 historical buildings were damaged. Among them, 100 are about to collapse. And these buildings include houses, apartment buildings, and mansions from the 19th century Ottoman period. And the Sursock Museum actually is located 800 meters away from the port. On a hill, so it was very exposed to the blast. So here we see the museum's main facade, which had tainted glass from the inside. The blast caused a big damage on the first floor. It actually broke all the glass, all the doors, the original doors between different rooms, which were like preserved since the construction of the house in 1912, so more than 100 years. No more doors from the second floor of the main historical building until the fourth basement. This is the museum before we were able to cover the windows. So of course, after the blast, the night of the blast, it was very stressful to leave the museum, all doors and windows open with the artwork inside. I will talk more about the damage to the artworks later on. This is a slide where we see the Salon Arabe, which is located on the first floor. This is the very typical Ottoman architecture with the diwan, where Nicolas Sursock, I forgot to mention, actually, this house was originally the mansion, private house of Nicolas Sursock. The name of the street holds the family, which is the family who built most of these houses in the area. This is a space that really, I mean, the museum and the building have gone through 2 world wars, the Lebanese 15-year civil war, many bombings, and never had any this room was intact since 100 years. And now we have lost the original doors, the original tainted glass. In 20 seconds here, we see the study of Nicolas Sursock, which is a reenactment of his room, the way it was when he was living in the house. And the painting we see on the floor is one of the most iconic painting for the Sursock Museum, which is a portrait of Nicolas Sursock by Kees van Dongen. Ironically, was torn. It has a 55 centimeters tear, ironically, because of the distancing kind of poteau that we had in the room. So here it's a picture of before and after. So this is a picture I took immediately after the blast. I was in the museum, actually. We were lucky that the museum had closed its doors 5 minutes before the blast. It was a Tuesday, which is normally the closing day of the museum. But because we were between 2 lockdowns, we thought that it was important to open at least 2 days for the public. So no one was inside the building apart from me and 3 of my colleagues. We were in the office spaces, and We were saved actually by my experience of the war in Lebanon, and the first reflex was I heard a sound that preceded the first explosion, unusual sound, and my reflex was to step out of the office far from the windows and ask my colleagues to step out. So we were protected in between the offices, no windows. We were very lucky. And so immediately the same night we had to go home and leave the 130 artworks. There were a lot of looters the first night, but we had reinforced the security and things were okay. This is a picture where we see the original tainted glass and of course, what it is today. This is an exhibition gallery on the first floor as well. We had opened months before an exhibition of pastel by Lebanese artist Georges Corm, Lebanese modern artist. When the blast happened, this room was very, very damaged, and we all thought about how lucky we were because the blast did not happen 6 months earlier. We had an exhibition of 20 works by Picasso, which was part of Picasso Méditerranée in collaboration with the Musée National Picasso in Paris. This is the permanent collection. So this is the second floor of the main building. As I mentioned, we had 130 artworks on display between the first and the second floor. Among them, 57 were damaged to various degrees. So the false ceilings mostly all collapsed. Here we see that the skylight of the main building was broken as well. So until now, we still do not have a roof in the main building. We have been working on weatherproofing the building in 2 phases. Now we just made sure it's all covered with plywood nylon for the the rain season that just started. But we will be soon we will soon be able to put the fixtures that we will have. So I wanted to talk about, sorry, I was a little bit unfocused. I wanted to talk a little bit about the efforts that we have been doing recently in order to at the same time secure works, secure the building for all the workers that are around, and answering all media requests. These were the first 2 months, really very, very hectic period. It was important for us to very early start a dusting campaign for the works, because sorry, I'm gonna skip this one. Even the works that were in the storage, the main storage of the museum is in basement 3. So the blast did not cause damage, fortunately, to the main storage and the artworks that were there. But there is a thin dust that came in all areas of the building. So we had to very quickly do a dusting campaign, because we, of course, ignore what composes this dust, and we could not take any risk. We had to dust all the books, the archive. I mean, this is a work that took us 2 months. Tremendous work with the help of many different volunteers. We even started restoring some of the artworks. Here we see Pastel by Georges Corm. That was the portrait of the mother of actually the collector, it's a long-term loan that we have at the museum. And it was a very dear work for him. We had, thanks to a partnership with the INP, Institut National du Patrimoine, and Alif Foundation, we had a paper restorer coming from France to work on restoring some of the paper-based works. I thought maybe it would be interesting to give you a brief about the museum, the Sursock Museum, and its history. Maybe I should start by putting this museum in context. It's the only art museum in Beirut. So Beirut art scene, for those who are familiar with it, is a quite interesting scene in its way, in the way it developed. Without any institutional support. We are, a country where the state doesn't exist, and in the cultural sector, of course, it's totally inexistent. There is no subsidies from the state. The sector has developed thanks to private initiatives, and the contemporary art scene, the Lebanese contemporary art scene, is a quite strong one that really did not develop with the support and the presence of museums, even though Sursock Museum had opened its doors in 1961. In the post-war period where this contemporary art scene developed, the museum was a little bit I would say on the side of what was happening, was a little bit irrelevant. It took years so that the board decides to enlarge, expand actually the building and renovate. And this is a restoration campaign that ended in 2015. And reopened under a new team. I was hired 2 years before the reopening of the museum with really facilities and a building that offered Beirut what it had lacked for 20 years. So infrastructure, like an auditorium, public library, workshop spaces, a public space with a cafe. And the way we worked on repositioning this museum before its reopening was really thinking about the 20 years that had preceded, where the museum was absent and away from the scene, thinking about the way the whole sector developed, the way the whole cultural landscape and the needs. And because I come from a background you presented, I was running the Arab Image Foundation for 17 years before taking the position of director at Sursock Museum. And for all those years, we were struggling for any project. If we wanted to do an exhibition, we had to really occupy spaces that were not equipped. So this museum was an opportunity for Beirut and the art scene to really have a tool that would serve a really wide audience and community. And this is how we worked on the programming strategy. So we have been presenting 12 to 14 exhibitions per year in the different spaces. Very often we invited curators from other institutes locally and internationally. We did partnerships with universities, museums, foundations. And we were presenting exhibitions that catered to different audiences, because we, as the only museum, we somehow have the mission of trying to widen the audience that goes to galleries or festivals and other art spaces. And because we had different spaces and of course this history of the museum itself, we worked a lot on the archive, on research-based exhibitions. So we have the main, this is a picture of the main exhibition hall, a temporary exhibition hall on the second basement of the building. And we, thanks to the fact that we were under lockdown for so many months, we didn't have any exhibition there. We actually, this is the first time in the past 5 years that we only had one temporary exhibition in the building and the permanent collection. So here we're seeing an exhibition that was really actually toured at least 10 different cities and museums with the partnership of we invited two curators, Rasha Salti and Christine Roudi. It's an exhibition that looks at the history of an exhibition that took place in the 70s in Beirut, done with the Palestinian. It's a virtual Palestinian museum. So I'll go quickly. This is an exhibition that François Cheval curated and that presented a year after. This was shown in 2000. Ironically, 2019 was a very important year for Sursock Museum. We produced major exhibitions such as the one you just saw and this one, the Baalbek exhibition is actually viewable on our website as a virtual tour. And this finally was the last opening we did of an exhibition before the end of 2019 was the Picasso exhibition end of September, which was the opportunity of having an audience of more than 200 people traveling to Beirut for this big party. We had like 4,000 people attending the exhibition. Unfortunately, we were expecting a lot of schools, but October 17, with the beginning of the revolution in Lebanon, disturbed a lot for very positive reasons at that time, but it disturbed completely our programming. And since October 17, actually, we have been facing many challenges at Sursock Museum. First was, of course, not knowing when the museum was going to open, when it was going to close. For a period we closed because we wanted to, join our voice to the voice of the people. But of course, we could not stay closed for a long time, especially that we had many exhibitions on. It's worth also mentioning that on October 17, we had the opening of a major exhibition as part of a very important biennale that's called Homeworks, which is organized by Ashkal Alwan, a partner institution. And so their opening was on October 17. And then for the first day, for the days following the opening, there were like maybe 100 people visiting from, for that occasion. There were 8 exhibitions in several spaces in the city, and we were all in the streets protesting. So we, before and after protest, I would go open the museum to show the exhibition at least to those who were gonna travel again. And this is how our Instagram profile looked like in that period, because we're keeping on closing and reopening again. So we were able to, of course, I should mention Corona and all of this. So we went to early lockdown in Lebanon on March 12th for 2 months. We reopened the museum on June 11. We reopened, of course, before even the lockdown. After October 17, our programmed exhibitions were one exhibition was canceled because we had loans, and the lenders did not want to take risk in this context of revolution and street protest and instability. And then other exhibitions were postponed because it was not the right moment. And whereas we had a schedule that was, confirmed until 2023, like many other museums, when we thought about reopening in June, we had to put up an exhibition in 2 months, part of a long-term loan. And since then, we actually were not able to program normally, because with the protest and October 17, we had the start of the financial major issues in Lebanon. So as maybe not everyone knows, we do not have access to our money anymore, and mainly to foreign currencies. So the dollars we have in the bank, we call them now lollars because they became Lebanese dollars. And so, which means concretely for a museum that we cannot, we used to, of course, if we screen a film or invite an artist to give a talk, we pay fees, we pay copyrights, we invite curators, so many things have become actually very difficult today. In all of this context, talking about the consequences of COVID-19 seems like for me almost another world, although I see how COVID-19 has a lot of consequences, of course, not only to Lebanon, but to the whole sector. And it isolates us even more, I would say. We feel, I know this is something that is shared by many colleagues throughout, the world. And somehow this is, I was mentioning that this kind of, context is so important for us. So we keep on having our conversations in these crazy times, actually. But in Lebanon, we have been, so if I summarize, October 17, of course, fall of half of the government, financial problems, bankruptcy, half of the population is under the level of poverty, and then COVID-19, and then the blast. I had prepared, I think, something to talk about what's next, but I actually, let me see my slides. I lost the track of my slides. Well, we are going to be busy for 1 year. So somehow, of course, it's very frustrating to be busy reconstructing a brand new museum, having to buy again equipment that we already had. I mean, this is money. We need to raise $3 million to reconstruct the museum. And I mean, do the restoration campaigns. We already had important support from Elif Foundation with a budget of $500,000 to weatherproof the building, first phase of reconstruction. And we had also support of $100,000 from the Bahraini Sheikh Hamay, who actually fundraised for the museum. And we were able to raise $100,000 through our platforms. We still have a long way to go, but we are in conversation with several organizations on the international level. Of course, with the financial and bank situation currently in Lebanon, we will not fundraise to give our money to banks. So we have found ways of like opening a bank account in France and having a kind of, the first grant is a kind of sub-grant from AFAC, a very important fund, Arab Fund for Arts and Culture, that support institutions and artists that took the funds for us so we can have them available outside Lebanon. This is a technical aspect, but it has made our life so difficult. All the supplies that we need to buy for the reconstruction of the museum are imported. So this means you need to be able to pay them with fresh dollars. So this is why I'm mentioning this. So for us, in a way, we're going to be busy rebuilding the museum, trying to, at the same time, not build projects around the reconstruction, but trying to do training of apprentis with the craftsmen who are gonna work on the tainted glass or the wooden panels and the Salon Arabe restoration. There is a lot of houses very similar to this one that will need to be restored and that will probably need more time to raise and to fundraise, to secure the funding. And this is why we have been thinking a lot also how to you know, find something positive in our like reconstruction efforts. I would welcome questions, conversation. I mean,
yeah, we have a few questions, Zeina. Thanks for that. I mean, it's an amazing story, and we talk a lot about resilience in this country, but that puts a whole new, your story puts a whole new perspective on the idea of resilience. It's an amazing story. Firstly, I was just wondering how it must have been a very difficult time for you and all your staff. How did your staff sort of cope during going through this process? It must have been really difficult for them.
it was, yeah, it was very difficult for all of us, but I think that, I mean, the day after the blast, we were all there at 8 in the morning to secure, you know, to secure the collection in the storage. What we were all shocked, like all these people and Beirutis, but also we are the team who did all this work. So we saw all our work gone in 20 seconds, and it was very difficult to accept. We were, I mean, until now we are very angry actually, and but we are in the action. We have no choice. So this somehow helps. You cannot ask yourself questions, you have to rebuild. We have a responsibility of the collection, of the building, of the history, of our audience, of Beirut. So we all were like one person, really all efforts, you know, we didn't even need to ask from anyone to not to count hours, to stay late, to work on weekends. I mean, it was very natural. And there is, I have to mention that there is an incredible solidarity that, you know, came out of the Lebanese people. We have an incredible youth that was in the street helping to like broom all the debris for a month. Everyone came to the museum also. We had a big number of volunteers.
Mm. I was going to ask that as well about the support from the people of Beirut. So that was that they got behind the museum and helped out. They must. I guess it means they must think the museum is a very important place for them culturally.
Yeah, I have to say, with the tremendous damage that you know was caused in the city, the international media came to the museums much before the Lebanese and regional ones. The local media really maybe came to the museum 2-3 weeks after the blast, as the day after we already had all the international media.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on it earlier. So have other sort of cultural organisations in Beirut been affected by the blast as well? And have you been offering each other support and help and that kind of thing?
Yes, that's yes, very good, very relevant. We have been all in touch. Of course, all the museums, we have been in conversation. We have the ICOM, you know, association and ICOM members. ICOM actually representative was in Beirut 2 days after the blast, and at Sursock Museum, and visiting all other museums. The museum, there were like 3-4 museums that were affected by the blast. One was very affected, not far from our museum. It's the Musée de la Préhistoire, but they were lucky not to have any damage in actions. The archaeological museum, the AUB archaeological museum, had major damage in one vitrine with the oldest glass pieces. And then, of course, all the art, I mean, art structures, galleries, they were huge. I mean, a lot of damage. And more than 130 artists lived or worked in the area. So the damage to the sector is, everyone is actually touched by this blast. From the sector, everyone.
And we've got a question here from Dana Andrew, and you've kind of touched on this, but it'd be good maybe to expand on. She said, was the museum able to receive support, practical and or financial, from the international museum community following the blast? And if so, what kind of support was most needed, and what support was received for this kind of emergency disaster response?
Yes, thank you for the question. It gives me opportunity of talking about the partnership. So we, of course, a lot of museums and institutions with whom we've been working have expressed their solidarity and their support and solicited me in case I had any, needs. For the first month, it was difficult to see how to organize this international collaboration, like solidarity and collaboration proposals. It took us 3 weeks to do the condition reports for the collection and understand our needs. We asked for support from the Institut National du Patrimoine, which is very related to the museum sector, although, it's like a school and they supported this mission, but they also visited the museum. They supported us with material. We lacked of, we didn't have actually a kit for really, we had what we needed, but not enough with the extent of the damage. So we received some conservation material. We also have been in conversation with the Centre Pompidou in Paris about the restoration of some of the artworks, and they have proposed their advice. So we are in conversation with the head of the restoration workshop. And now we are agreeing on which works should be sent to France for their restoration. Probably the Van Dongen will be sent because it's a long procedure, let's say, long process. We have a restorer who have been working with the museum for the past 6 years. She's a German, trained in Stuttgart, but she lives in Lebanon for the past 15 years. So she is able to do the rest of the campaign. For us, it is very important to accept and find a way of involving both local and international expertise. And this is how we have been thinking about our dusting and restoration campaigns. So we are in conversation also with I should not forget institutions. I didn't prepare the list, but we have been in conversation with the British Library, with the Tate Modern, the MoMA. I mean, really, many of these museums have offered their services and help. So we are taking a lot of advice. We are confirming, some of the initiatives we have been taking, and this is very helpful. And yeah.
Another question here is kind of related really from Pippa Thorogood. She says, she says, hi Zeina. Question, the team working on the collection post-blast, where did they come from? Were they from Lebanon or they internationally? And she's also asking, has COVID hampered the repair work after the blast?
So to talk about the team first, I have to say we have a very small team at the museum. So the scientific team, we are 6 staff, and unfortunately the head of collection and registrar left Lebanon in June to just settle in France. So when this happened, I didn't have a head of collections. I was in the process of hiring, which really, but she trained, we have 2 art handlers who were amazing, who really are playing an immense role. The archivist and librarian who has knowledge with paper conservation, although she never practiced, also with the support of these expert, was able to really lead a team of 6 volunteers. The volunteers came all from, we have a few museum studies, and they all came from one of these university, Amman University. They were either students or past students. We only had 1 paper restorer coming from France, who was sent by ENP, as I mentioned. We have lack of paper conservators in Lebanon. In general, this is a sector that is not very developed. Most of the private collectors I know are sending their artworks actually to be restored abroad. We have a few restorers that are really very competent, but that have too much work and cannot, of course, cope with all the restoration work that, and we at Sursock have been thinking, because we have the restoration workshop that is very well equipped. We have a very big space. We have been thinking how to host restoration campaigns for private collectors. So we have been in conversation with some of them, and we have been really also thinking about if some, I mean, it's early to talk about, you know, chantier école, like really, this is something that we have been thinking about for a few years, but that definitely needs to be implemented right after we are done with these campaigns, and probably start thinking about it and train, like have our campaigns training some younger auteurs to, you know, be able to build, yeah, this is the professionalization of, you know, works around the museum sector is something that many institutions are interested in. And with the blast, there will be definitely more efforts to go towards this direction.
Mm-hmm. And maybe you could also tell us a bit about the art scene in the city. Is it quite are there lots of artists? Is it quite a vibrant art scene? And what part does your museum play within that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very vibrant art scene. You have openings happening all the time. You have a very hybrid, you have a diversity of institutions, let's say galleries. Some galleries are almost non-profit spaces. You have art spaces that are like the Beirut Art Center, Ashkal Alwan, which is an art academy. And this is a whole ecology that really we all complete each other's. And Sursock Museum has been a platform for everyone, those who needed, you know, some spaces or a wider audience. We have been also, we collaborate a lot. We lend each other equipment for exhibitions. We, you know, we sometimes also even share staff, such as like AV, consultants, etc. And the Sursock Museum has been an important platform for the scene since its reopening. And as I mentioned, the Sursock Museum really, when it opened first in 1961, had a very major impact on the art scene in Lebanon. I think it's only with the post-war period, after like 15 years of stagnation during the war, it's only in the post-war period that the museum had lost its, you know, yeah, interaction with the scene. Mm. And today, of course, we are all, you know, in conversation. We feel more than ever the need of, like with October 17 and the revolution, there were a few, you know, meetings with all institutions from Beirut and also other cities in the country. Because we feel more and more the need of, you know, getting organized as collectives. But today it's even more necessary, because we need to think about not only how we will support each others, but also how are we going to program, you know, what is relevant today in you know, in Lebanon and in the world. So, I mean, this is a question that I think everyone asks themselves, but in Lebanon, it's even like too many layers to take into consideration.
And kind of related to that, maybe we've got a question here from Christine McLean, who says, "What an incredible presentation!" And she asks, "Has the museum considered how it might represent or provide the space for people to reflect on the experiences of the explosion?"
I mean, it would be interesting. I think it's too early, because we are still, you know, today was the first day of heavy rain in Beirut, and you have already one building that collapsed. We didn't heal actually yet. The city didn't heal, and this would be part of it, definitely. This kind of, you know, giving a platform for people. We all need to communicate and express a lot. but we need to be ready to program. And really, I think that we are hoping that early January, you have a few galleries that already reopen their doors. And of course, Lebanese people are known for their resilience, as you mentioned, but also there is a kind of like, we are a little bit fed up of being resilient. So there is a kind of not resistance to program again, but we need some time. But definitely, we all more than ever need to find ways to involve the communities in like the programming, even in the decision of what we would be programming. So in that sense, we definitely need to give a platform to Beirutis and all people who were harmed by the blast.
Yeah. And again, kind of related, I've got a question here from Tim Cook, who sounds like he knows the city, and he says you've got huge admiration for what has been achieved at the Sursock Museum during the post-Civil War renovation, and now this challenge as well. And he said he's conscious that there are contrasts in the city, including marginalised people in places such as Sabra and Shatila. And he's saying, would you be able to offer any sense of the challenges and initiatives of cultural organisations who engage with those communities?
Yes, of course. This is a very important question. Actually, this I didn't mention, but Sursock Museum is a free of entrance museum. So we have the opportunity, let's say, or ability of receiving, communities from all over the country. Unfortunately, they do not come easily because we are located in a very chic district and street. And this house looks like it has something very impressive. So we do our best to have a lot of events taking place on the esplanade, which is a kind of extension of the street. We have been working on developing educational programs with communities. Unfortunately, we're just starting to be able to fundraise to expand the human resources of the museum in order to reach out to these communities and build relevant projects with them and be able to really make them feel that this museum is their museum. We need to have more, staff. We need to develop an educational department, which we don't have. And we were counting. So the first 3-4 years after the reopening, we were very busy in settling the museum and starting to fundraise to develop further. And then now we have to, put in pause. But this is also perhaps an opportunity of doing things differently without more staff. I don't know. Yes, we have to think about how to work on with the current situation in Lebanon. We need more than ever the museum to be a place for social cohesion, for really a place of like a public space that would gather people from different backgrounds, definitely, including, of course, the immigrants, the Palestinian communities, the Syrian refugees, and
yeah. So I've got another question kind of related to that, kind of related as well, from Jonathan Gammond. He says, we hear a lot about the sectarian divides in Lebanon. How do these divisions affect your work as a museum?
It doesn't really. On the contrary, what this museum is able to do is to gather people and regroup communities. And it's true that our political system is very sectarian. Perhaps a part of the population is sectarian, but the youth is not sectarian at all. The art scene is not sectarian. We are facing more problems in relation to freedom of expression more and more, which is a problem we're not facing, for a long time. And this is very worrisome for the scene. This is mainly, and of course, the challenges of, lack of support. And the big challenge today is the brain drain. So people are leaving the country. A lot of artists already left because even before the blast, now the blast has been, la goutte d'eau. but before the blast, we all were facing already problems of not being able to. You cannot travel anymore because you don't have foreign currencies. So if your kids need to, are at university outside the country, you cannot send money anymore to them. And our salaries all were really divided by 8. So basically a lot of people are leaving the country, were leaving before the blast. And with the blast, there is, I don't know how the art scene will look like because the young artists have left or are leaving. This is a major problem, I think. This is the biggest challenge we will be facing.
And kind of related to that as well, there's a question from Gim Duncan Rice, and obviously I guess it's a question resources we've already talked about, but does the museum have any plans to assist or collaborate with local artists that were affected by the blast or COVID?
Not directly, but we have been fundraising together with many other initiatives. Among them, the AFAC, the Arab Fund for Arts and Culture, did a solidarity fund to which we diverted a lot. I mean, all people who were approaching us because we have visibility that not all other smaller structures have. So when we are approached for a better understanding of the art scene and not only the museum scene and how to support it, we have been diverting a lot to this fund. And this fund is supporting artists for their they did a call for in support of artists with grants to support either if they had losses in their equipment, material, but also even their house. And this solidarity fund is gonna regularly do calls that are focused. So the next call they are preparing is for institutions, cultural and artistic institutions. And of course, because we are, this is really a landscape that, I mean, we need all different structures to be rebuilt, including galleries. So the Solidarity Fund will probably also be able to support some galleries, which in many ways, you could think, I mean, a gallery is commercial, not, but in this case, we all are pushing for support of all different, even small, stores that were producing, limited edition books for artists, even if there are stores and are for commercial entities, they all need support.
Mm-hmm. And also, you mentioned obviously the redevelopment, and you reopened in 2015. So now through the rebuilding process, are you going to rebuild in the same way, or are you going to do anything, take the opportunity to do anything different in terms of the rebuilding?
No, we are doing exactly the same way. The BOQ is still fresh. The architect is still around. The architect who initially worked with Jean-Michel Villemotte, because I mean, I didn't mention, but the architecture was done by Jean-Michel Villemotte and the renovation of the building. The building, the museum, I will go back to the first slide just to give an idea. The museum's extension took place under the esplanade because this is a house that doesn't have foundation. They digged in front of it and they reinforced the structure in order to add 4 floors under the esplanade. And what saved the building from any structural damage with the blast is the fact that this renovation, in order to dig in front of the house, they had to put foundation and to reinforce the structure. So basically, this is what probably saved the building. As you see, there is the stone. I mean, the building itself is intact.
Mm-hmm.
So we will redo it the same. We are keeping you see this, these are all the metallic, the galvanized metal that we removed from the 2 floors. It's all in the false ceiling for the technical, equipped. And we are piling them in front of the museum because it helps for just to not forget that this museum has a lot of damage. It doesn't look like, but we need to find a lot of money to rebuild it. So we decided to keep it for the moment as a monument and testimony for our fundraising efforts.
I can see well. That makes sense. So we're coming to the end of what's been an amazing hour. You've given us a really fascinating insight into the museum, the challenges you face, and the city as well. I suppose my last question, I'm kind of interested. I hope it doesn't sound like a silly question after all you've told us, but are you sort of optimistic for the future of the museum and the city?
I'm optimistic for the future of the museum. Yeah, for Lebanon, I don't know, but for the future of the museum, yes, because this is a tool that is very important for future generation. We have a huge archive, a very important collection. And yes, I don't know about Beirut and the country, really. Beirut actually is sad today. I don't want to finish on a sad note, but we need to find ways of really bringing all the support that was expressed for the heritage and for the heritage sector, but also for people to come back in their homes. And I hope that, I mean, if this is possible, then we can have hope. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That was amazing, Zeina. Thanks so much for spending the last hour with us. It's been really fascinating, and I wish you huge luck with rebuilding the museum.
Thank you very much.
It's amazing. Thanks so much for joining us. We're very
Thank you.
Thank you.